You're here to learn user interface design because you want to transform a wireframe like this into a polished design. Well, let's not waste any time. There's no resources to download for this tutorial. Just copy this text from the video description and paste it into Figma. We're going to move quickly, so if you're totally new to Figma, then I'll link to my free 30-minute crash course which will teach you all you need to know to complete this tutorial. In Figma, go to the toolbar, press on the text tool, click on the canvas, then Command V to paste, and you can see my keyboard shortcuts in the bottom left corner in that dark rectangle. Then we're going to go to Actions, click on that. We're going to type in split text and open the split text plugin. Make sure your settings are the same as mine, then click Submit, and you'll notice in the Layers panel on the left, all these text, each line has been split into its own text box. So we're going to grab the top two and drag them out, Family, Athletic, and a Membership, just drag them out of the way. And then the bottom one, so Command click to deep select that, then drag that out. Okay, so then with all the text that's remaining, we're going to double click the word individual to copy and paste in the name of the auto layout frame. Then we're going to duplicate it. Then the one on the right, it was Command E to duplicate if you missed that. We're going to double click on the name of it and then type in the word family. Okay, so expand the individual panel, click on family text layer, then scroll down and shift click on the very bottom layer, apply for family. They are all selected. Then we're going to press backspace to delete all of those. So we just have our individual items in there now in that column. Let's do the same with family by removing individual. Click on individual, shift click, apply for individual, then backspace to delete those. Fantastic. So we have the correct information organized now in our two columns, title at the top and the line at the bottom. Okay, we're going to make a frame. So press F, you'll get this menu. Then make sure you go within desktop and then click desktop. As long as it's 1440 wide, that's all you need for now. And we can change the rest later. Okay, we're going to select all these items. We're going to click and drag them into this desktop frame. And then we're going to click on this bottom one and we're going to align it to the horizontal center. Now use the position icon on the top right, but from now on I'll start using shortcuts. So that's that one there, Option H again, and they're aligned to the horizontal center. Then I'm going to select these individual and family columns and just click and drag this space in between. I'll change this to 160, just holding shift so I get increments of 8. And if yours aren't like that, go to preferences and then nudge amount and make sure the big nudge is set to 8. You can type in whatever number you want here. Probably don't do 51. 8's good. But if you shift and push up and down, you will get that big nudge amount now of 8. Fantastic. So these two columns, I'm going to click and drag them here to the center horizontally and vertically, just so they're roughly in position and the structure of the page is starting to take shape. Click and drag the top two items into a rough position. This font is too small. It really needs to be bigger for a headline, so we'll maybe make it 32 to begin with. You can just kind of drag these around so they look vaguely right. We're going to select the family auto layout frame and we're going to change the space between items here to 8, just so there's a little bit of space that we can actually see these items separated out. Then let's go over to the individual frame and do the same when you just type the number 8 in there and then press tab. Okay, so these look a little bit more like lists now. I want to put a stroke around each of those so we can just see them separately. So click on the individual, click plus net on the stroke row, and this is just a black stroke, which is fine for now. Let's just change it to be on the outside and 1 point, that's absolutely fine. Then we need some space between the strokes and padding here. So let's put a 16 and 16 for a horizontal and vertical padding. Let's do the same for family. We click on it on the layers panel. We change the padding to 16, 16. Then we click plus on stroke, change that to the outside and 1. Okay. So this is basically a wireframe now. We have kind of a rough layout of what this is supposed to look like. Let's just make sure these columns are moved back to the horizontal and vertical center. The whole frame. Maybe just, slightly finesse these headings just so it doesn't look, completely terrible. And it just is our basic wireframe to start from. And then we're going to dive in to the UI design following a proven process. So I'm going to rename this as wireframe. Just double clicking on the name there of the frame. You can do that on the canvas or on the layers panel. Then click on the name of it, hold down Option as you click and drag, and you'll make a copy of that frame. I want it exactly 160 in between, so let me just move this back one. Doesn't really matter. Then we will go in and rename this, just double clicking again, and let's call this design. So firstly, let's tackle typography. This is choosing fonts, doing the typesetting, establishing a bit of hierarchy. So in terms of fonts, we're starting off here with Inter, which tends to be the default font in Figma, and it works perfectly fine. It's usually better if you play with the letter spacing. I'll make it a little bit narrower here, and you can see looking at the left and the right, that already looks better. So we'll compare that better looking into some maybe other options. So what you would do is audition certain fonts. So let me just type in a few probably inappropriate options here. And you would look at the two of them and make a decision on what's best. We have lots of other videos on typography if you want to dive into that. But I want you now to install Instrument Sans, which is a Google font. You can do this for free. The regular, the condensed, and the semi-condensed versions. We're going to start off by selecting the semi-condensed option. And for this membership one at the bottom, I'm going to change the weight of this from regular to semi-bold. We'll keep the point size the same for now while we're comparing. With the letter spacing, we can bring this down a little bit as well to our eye. And looking back and forth, I think -3 is going to be good, keeping that quite a tight unit for headlines. Then I want to make a little bit of a logo out of this Family Athletic title, which is the name of the company. So I'm going to make it all capitals. And I'm thinking a lot of sportswear have this kind of condensed looking or sports companies or sports teams. So we'll go to the actual condensed width font, not the semi-condensed. We'll keep it at the regular way. And maybe just play with the letter spacing here, holding down Shift to do it in increments of 10%. Maybe it's super wide. I think a little bit wider than standard, like 20%. It kind of has got the appearance of a word mark here. So if we compare these two side by side, we've got something that looks very default with Inter, and we've got something here now which is still very, very legible and professional, but it has a little bit more uniqueness and particularity anyway, and personality to it. So we'll go with that. Okay, let's go down and change all the rest of these fonts now. So we're using Instrument Sans semi-condensed. So we'll go down to this bottom paragraph text and just make that Instrument Sans with the regular width. So that is all fine for now. The same with these items in the columns. So I'm going to click on individual and then shift click apply for individual and change all of these to Instrument Sans. Let's maybe just make this a little bit bigger. So we'll put that up to 18 pixels because I just think make sure you're designing at 100%, by the way. That will just help you see, what appropriate size is on. It needs to be a little bit bigger than like disclaimer at the bottom. So we'll also make the family list items 18. We'll change that to Instrument Sans as well, making sure all the fonts have been changed. You could have done this via an action as well, but we'll do it manually here so we know that you can follow along easily. Okay, this is far too small, so I'm going to click on membership and I'm going to change the point size here. Let's just double it for now. We'll take it up to 64. And let's align that again back to the horizontal center. And then looking at these headlines, they don't really stand out, or the column headers, should I say. So I'm going to select both individual and family, and then I'm going to change this from Instrument Sans to Instrument Sans semi-condensed, which is our headline font that we use for membership, in the semi-bold weight. And then let's make these bigger, so you can kind of just push up and see what's an appropriate size. But I think we started off at 18, didn't we? So we'll try some options here within our 8-pixel system. I'll increase that membership up to 96, which is double what we use for the column headers as 48. Make sure that's all aligned properly. So I'm using -3 letter spacing for my big header, but I've not changed the letter spacing for my column headers. So I'm just going to push this down a little bit, probably not as much as -3 because they're a bit smaller. So let's go with -2. Then these prices aren't standing out, so let's select both of those. And then we're going to change that as well to semi-condensed, semi-bold. Maybe make this a little bit larger too. Let's just double it. Now that clearly separates from the list below. Now there's a space before the slash of before month, but not in the after $250. So let's make sure they're the same. And this is important considerations when it comes to typography, making sure all the typesetting is right. Okay, so we're starting to see a little bit of hierarchy being established here compared to the original wireframe that we had. What we need to do is work on the spacing to make sure it looks right. So let's introduce some guides. Click plus on the layout guide row. And now currently got a grid. Let's change that to columns. I'll move it up here so you can see it. And you can push your up and down arrows here to decide how many columns you want. Let's go for 2. The margin, which is a space either side, left and right, I'm going to change that to 128 and the gutter to be 32. These are all divisible by 8 within our system. Then we can close this. Okay, so I need to get my elements on my frame aligning to this grid. So I can click on the family column to select it. And then I can just hold my mouse button down and drag this around to align it in this way. I can do the same with the individual, align it to the left of the column, align it to the right of the column. But I think it's going to be better if we actually just use auto layout for this entire frame. So click to select the frame and then press Shift A, and that will change this to an auto layout frame. Now it's automatically created this as a grid, but we're just going to do it as a vertical auto layout. So we'll change it back to that. Now you can see the margins, the padding it's created is not the same as our margin. So I'm going to change that to 128 so that it matches up now the margin and padding. So everything is sitting perfectly there, aligned to the left of the left column. I'm going to change the space in between items to 128 as well within our big auto layout frame, the main design frame. And the height now, we can't see some of the items, so we'll change this height to hug contents, which means it'll automatically expand to whatever we have there, keeping the width as a fixed width of 1440. I'm going to start aligning this from the top center. And now we just need to look at those columns sitting side by side again. So Shift click, select both of them, then Shift A to create an auto layout frame that contains them, and we'll rename this plans. And then we want this to be horizontal. So we'll click on that icon in the auto layout options. We're going to change it to full container. You can see that blue bounding box around it just expand out there. Now the gap in between them should be the same as our column gutter, and we can always check what that is, and we set that as 32. So we'll go back now to this plans auto layout frame and change the gap in between to 32. Fantastic. So the gap's right, but they're both kind of pushed to the middle. So what we need to do is click on one of them, individual, and we're going to change the width from hug contents to fill container. If we do the same then with family, they will both become the same width and they will span fully each column. Fantastic. You can see everything is aligning perfectly there with our grid if we just turn it on and off using the shortcut Shift G, which you can see in the bottom left corner. So I'm going to click on individual, and then I notice that the height of this doesn't extend all the way down. So I can change this to fill container, and we can see now that the blue bounding box does extend down the entire height, so it is the same height as the family box. Now this family athletic and membership seem a bit separate from each other. They should be together in units. So Shift click, select them both, Shift A to make an auto layout frame, and let's change the gap in between. So I'm just holding down Shift while I push down here to just kind of eyeball what I think is a good sort of gap between them. And because there's a little bit of gap around them anyway with their text boxes, a gap of say just 8 seems fine. I think we'll just leave it at 8. And then they become a bit more of a unit together. Expand out the family column and click on Apply for Family. This needs to look like a button. So let's make sure we can do that now. First, let's zoom in. I'm going to click on the whole design frame actually. Shift 2 to zoom to selection, then Command 0 for 100%. Click on Apply for Family again. Shift A to turn this into an auto layout frame. I'm going to rename this to BTN for button. I'm going to go over to the side and add a fill. And let's just make this black. And then we'll go and select the text by clicking on the layer in the layers panel on the left and then change the fill to white. Click on button in the layers panel to select it. Now we don't need a gap in between. There's nothing else there. We'll just leave that as it is. The padding we need to introduce so this looks a bit more button-like. So let's just start with 8 and 8. We'll do the same thing on the individual. We'll expand out the individual frame. Click on Apply for Individual. Shift A to make it an auto layout frame. Rename it BTM. Use 8 and 8 for the padding. We'll add a fill. Just drag that down to black. Then go over to the left layers panel. Click on the Apply for Individual layer. Click Fill and then drag that up to white. So we've got 2 buttons now, and they look separate from the list, whereas before they look like part of the list. I need to make some spaces in between these list items because they're too close together, but that's changing the whole thing. So I think what we need to do is have all these lists of features or what's included as one list. Shift click on these to select them and then Shift A to make an auto layout frame so they can stay together as one unit with an 8 pixel gap between each list item. Then I'm going to click on the whole family auto layout frame and then start to experiment again, pushing up while holding shift to see what's a good sort of gap in between my items here. And you can zoom in and out and have a look at this and see what feels right. I think we'll start with 40 and we need a similar padding. So we'll change the padding to 40 as well for the family auto layout frame. Let's go over to the individual frame and do the same thing. We're going to change the padding to 40 and 40. And we want to change the space here to 40, but we didn't do the list, did we? So let's Command Z undo that. Go to the individual and make sure the list of what's included are selected. Shift A to make that auto layout frame, then click on individual again, and now we can change that gap to 40. And it will just made a gap between those other items you can see with the pink boxes or the pink lines now there. So these are a bit more spaced out now and this makes more sense. Now this frame 3 and all these frame names are creeping in. So let's go to our actions menu and go to rename layers. Now you must have something selected. So I'm going to select this entire frame name design because I've also got a frame 1 up there I want renaming. And now Figma's AI is going to rename the layers. And if you look in the layers panel, you can see how it's automatically renamed those there. So we don't have any frame 1, frame 2, etc. Now, the thing that's standing out to me is those buttons not being lined up. So let's expand our layers and then select the features container and the button within the individual box. Shift A to make another auto layout frame, and then let's change the height here to fill container, and you can see the blue box around them expands to the bottom. And we're going to change the space between from 40 to auto, so that automatically fills that entire height there. So if your settings are the same as that, apply for individual should now be at the bottom of the box in line with apply for family. We've got a lot of space here on the edges of each of those boxes on the right hand side. If I just maybe draw a rectangle to illustrate this, just press R. You don't need to follow along with this bit. I'm going to drag it in, and just so you know what I'm doing, I've just clicked on Ignore Auto Layout there so I can drag this around freely. This whole side here is just a big gap, and I don't like that. So I think first of all, maybe this button can expand and fill up the full width of each box. So I'm going to change button to fill container. But it won't move yet because its outer parent frame also needs to be changed to fill container. So let's do the same over on the family one. we'll go down to button. Now this isn't within a other container, so we can just change this one itself to fill container, and that will expand right across. Right, so that's helping in the bottom right corner. And what about the top right corner? What would you do here? We could introduce something new, like an image or some sort of graphic or icon, but just working with what we've got. Let's select the plan name and the price, Shift A to create an auto layout frame, and let's change this from vertical to horizontal. So this price can go into the top right. We're going to change that to fill container and the space between to auto, and that moves that over to the far right there. Now these aren't quite sitting on the same horizon line, so we can change that to align to the center or the bottom, which we'll do for now because it is type. Same with individual. Click on the plan name, click on price, Shift A to create the auto layout frame. Then we're going to change this to horizontal. We'll align this to the bottom. We'll change the space between to auto. And the width to fill container. So having a look at these side by side, you can already see just by using a better font, proper hierarchy with our type setting, and also by the spacing that we employ and making the layout work, already we have made sense of the information that's there. And that's what we are here to do as designers. Now this is pretty clear, but it's still quite flat and we can do a lot more with it. So these buttons are not looking very button-like to me. So I'm going to select both of them. And I'm going to change the appearance of them to give them a corner radius that is infinite. So I'll put 999 in, which basically means it fully rounds it to a pill shape. I'm going to change the top and bottom padding to 16. I don't like the text itself, it is too thin. So I'm going to select the text in both buttons. And I'm going to change this from Instrument Sans to what we are using for our headlines. Whoops, not the condensed, but the semi-condensed. And I'm changing that from regular to semi-bold, so it's the same as all our headings. And it's looking a bit small now, so we need to make this a little bit bigger. It's currently 18. Maybe let's change it up to 24. Yeah, 24. These are definitely more button-like right now. But it's a bit strange that they're aligned to the center when everything else is sort of, arranged to the left or within kind of like a column type feel. So we'll arrange it to the left in our auto layout frame, and then we'll change the padding on either side to 32, 24. Let's go with 32, just so it sits a bit more comfortably within the button and isn't too close to the left. It's maybe too much. I'll split the difference, 28. So you should have the same settings as me now. Just check they're all the same on your auto layout frame for your button. Okay, now let's think about color and brighten this thing up. I'm going to select this button for family here because buttons are somewhere that you really want to accent. You want them to stand out, and color is a great way for them to do that so the user knows what they are supposed to click on. So for this, I'm going to think about just choosing a brand color here. So with this being a family thing, we really want to promote somewhere that's safe, somewhere that's trustworthy, somewhere that's calming and is about possibility. And it also has a sense of, heritage and that kind of thing. And it's related to sport. Blue does all of those things. Lots of sports teams that play in blue, people that wear blue shirts. And this works great. So let's just find a blue that sits really well on the white. So I'm just kind of dragging this around initially to have a look at this. And this would be a longer process. And we've got lots of videos on color. But just playing with the hue, saturation and lightness levels is a really good way to do it. And I recommend using this setting. We're going to use this to make sense of the colors that we choose, the HSL. So make sure you're on this and not the RGB settings on your color picker. So maybe just copy my settings here, 222, 67, 45, type those in, and that's the blue that we will start with, and that can be sort of our brand blue. Straight away you can see how much that stands out now as a button. So we're going to reuse this thing. So on the fill, we're going to click on these 4 circles, and then this plus icon, and this is to create a new style or variable. So we're going to call this brand blue, and then click create style. You can see the fill name now changes from that X reference to brand blue. So I'm going to select family and the price for the family, and I'm going to fill here. And you can see that we can actually go over to our libraries and click on brand blue. And this works. This blue is still legible. It's still contrasted enough on this white background. So we're able to use that as our kind of primary brand color. Now we want to start introducing a neutral base here. Now we already have white in the background, but I think we can do better than that. Something more interesting and something a bit less harsh as well, contrast wise. So let's change this fill. So 100% is going to be too harsh. So let's start dialing this down to maybe like a 95. We just kind of play around and look at this gray and what it looks like here. Let's go with 94 to begin with. Now I can't really see what that looks like. So I'm going to change my interface, my page color, just dragging this down to more of a mid-gray. So now you can see with that wireframe that's white and our design, which has the light gray background, we can see the colors a bit more clearly now. Click back onto design. Let's go over to this fill. Now this is perfectly okay, this sort of 94% lightness option for now, but let's use something that's a bit more specific and fits together more. So if we go to our brand blue and click on the settings and then click on this actual swatch here in the properties, we can see that the hue number is 222, is bringing this particular kind of blue along the spectrum there. So we can use that to make an off-white, very light blue for our background instead of this light grey. So I'm going to change the hue to 222. It won't change yet because there's no saturation at all. Now if we turn it up to 100, you can see it's that blue, but that's going to be too much in my opinion. I want to do something very subtle. So I'm going to bring it all the way down to maybe just 10 on the saturation, or even just half that. Let's try that, 5. So it's just a very subtly blue. And that will just tie this whole thing together. These kind of details, they matter to me and they should matter to you because this is what design is all about and designers care about this stuff. Like if we change the saturation to 0, so I can just sort of toggle this on and off on a fill layer below. If I just hide that, turn it on, off, on. On the video rendering here on YouTube, you probably can't even see the difference. But if you try that on your own screen, you probably will. Okay, let's get rid of that one that we don't need. I want to select both the individual and family boxes and bring a color. But first I'm actually just going to copy the fill color from my design frame, then select again the individual and family frames, and let's add the same fill to them and then adjust it. So I'm going to go and click on plus for the fill. I'm going to paste it in. So now they will look like they did before, that they have no fill whatsoever. And I'll click on that. It's because I just want to adjust it from this setting. So we'll start with 94% on our lightness. I just want to push this up a little bit so they sit a bit lighter. Now, as a general principle of UI design, we want lighter elements on top. For the sense of depth, it just makes sense to the eye and creates a proper sense of depth, because when light hits something, the things that are closer to the light source are going to be brighter. So we have darker to the back, lighter to the front. So the cards are on top of the background. They're going to be lighter than what's underneath. Now, the hue and saturation values just kind of got changed as they sometimes automatically get changed in Figma. I'm just going to type those in again. It's 222 and 5 and then 99 for the lightness. We can close that. So we've got 94 for our background, and then we've got 99 for our cards on top. Let's select individual and family again. We don't need this stroke anymore. Let's get rid of that because we've now colored the cards to delineate them from the background, and that is a much more subtle look. We don't really need them to be in those prisons of the black stroke, and that was just pulling focus in the hierarchy. So we don't want that. We want the weight on the page, the ink, the color we call it on the page, to be, from things that are relevant and guiding us around. So I'm going to select a few items with this black fill color because, again, this is 100% black and that can be a little bit too much, and we can make it a bit more subtle and pull all the thing together. So let's make this an off black to go with our off whites. So I'm going to do the same thing again, change the hue to 222. We'll start with a very low saturation, like 2, and the lightness, as you see, is I just push it from high to low, how this sort of looks. And something just there like a 10 really works as just an off black grey, maybe 20. I think, yeah, it can be a bit even but more subtle. That's still contrasted enough for us. And maybe just put that to 5 so it's the same as the other one. So 222, 5, and 20. So we've got 20% for our text on a background, which is either 94 or 99% lightness. Let's save this dark grey fill as a style. Then I want to make sure all of my text is in this colour so we don't have any black left. So a few ways you can do it. You can click and select, each individual thing. So we'll do it that way first of all. But an easy way to do it is if you just click on design, it actually shows you all the colours within the selection. So you see here, all the blacks that we've got, we can actually, by clicking on the style icon, change all of those to grey text. So then we know that they are all done correctly. And this shows us all the colours that we've got here as part of the selection. But we still have some things that are white. So I'm going to copy this lightest off-white and paste it over the top of that. And I think that's the text that says apply for in each button. If we keep pressing shift, then we'll then see that now we've only got 4 colours. Our light grey, our very slightly darker grey, our brown blue, and our grey text. This is improving all the time, but now the individual box looks a bit strange compared to the family one with the blue. So select the apply for individual button, and then where we have a fill of the grey text, I'm going to change that to the brown blue first of all. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the link to the style, detaching the style. And I'm going to click on fill. And what we'll do here is we'll select something from the opposite side of the colour wheel. So if you type in -180, which is half of 360 degrees, you'll get something directly opposite on the colour wheel, which is what we call a complementary colour. So in this case, it's going to give us an orangey yellow. It's kind of a gold, which I think is really good. Let's make this even a little bit more gold looking. That works, I think, for an expensive membership plan. You feel like, this is gold, this is premium, and that may be appeal to the sort of individual psychology as well. So I'll just play around with the saturation lightness levels till I get to something I like. And then I'll select individual and I'll just paste this in and just make sure you've got that same hex reference there, DA9, C0B, or these HSL values 42, 90, 45. Now I'm actually going to dial this a little bit. I've selected all of them because I want to make sure that this text is legible on this background. You see, if we make this too light, it's not really going to be easy to read, but if we make it too dark, it doesn't have the look that we want. So let's just finesse this, and I think we'll finish with that. 42, 95, 41. That's what it's now become. So make sure your gold is the same as mine. I'm going to make this into a style. Click plus, and let's name this gold. It may look a little bit different in video, but hopefully in your design software, this is looking as good as it is in mine in terms of the colors. These are working together well. Let's do more with these prices. I think maybe just putting them into a box will help them sit in that area graphically a little bit more. So I'm going to press Shift A, and then we're going to add a stroke to this, and let's make that also gold. Let's just make that centered, that stroke, and it is 1 as the thickness. Let's round these corners off. 8, 16, I think just 8 is fine. And then we're going to go up to the padding. The space between 0, we don't have anything there. And the padding is going to be 16, left and right. I think the same, maybe, 8 for the vertical, or the top and bottom, I should say. Now that sits, it has a more similar presence to the title in that area, but doesn't overwhelm it because individual is still larger. Let's do the same on the family pricing. We'll select the text, we'll change to an auto layout. We will make the space between 0, left and right padding 0. But, I've inadvertently changed the appearance there, so I'll just go back and change that back to 100% opacity. Corner radius is 8. All the settings are the same basically. Add a stroke. Let's use our libraries, a brand blue, and we'll make that on the center. I've just noticed one of my colors was a variable and the others were styles. That doesn't matter for the purposes of this demonstration, but best to keep everything neat. This is coming together color-wise, and we're beginning to establish in general with our colors, with our spacing, with our fonts, a design system. So I would encourage you to have a page, have an area where you actually create your system and you create the styles, yes, in Figma, but you can also create a page, which gives you sort of a guideline of what you're doing. So you would have these colors here, so you would give them names, brand blue, we called this one. And you could create a whole sort of layout. You want to think about your different sort of headings. Maybe I'll just copy this heading here. I'll just alt-click and drag it over. And this might be our heading 1 or 2. Let's call this the H2. This might be our H3 or even H4 actually. And we can type out the whole name of the font with the exact width and weights as well, and even point sizes or percentages and the letter spacing, and just have a whole guideline here for our design system. And this will really help us as we go through and design more and more sections and more pages on our website or app. And you could carry on and on. Now, this isn't something we need to do right now, but I'm just kind of illustrating what you might do with that. And this is something we cover, in greater depth in our courses and, in some of our other videos. But let's push on and finish polishing off this design. So I'm going to select both the individual and family here and just have a look at kind of the spacing and how that works. I think we can actually let this breathe even a little bit more. So I'm just going to push up with the space in between on each of those and just change that up to 56. And this tweaking is what we do as designers. Just because we did layout earlier doesn't mean it's finished. These corners maybe need rounding so they fit with the general look of the page, the softness of the grays, the round corners on the buttons, and as we used on the pricing. And they sit really well now as individual cards. Now we could leave this kind of flat layout, but I think that we can do more graphically to really guide the user around this and also bring a little bit of polish to it as well. These buttons are looking a little bit flat and would be a little bit clearer as a button if we had something else in except text, some sort of icon. So you can just search for icons and use one of these plugins. I'm going to use the feather icons at the top, and I'm thinking some sort of arrow here. So let's just go for this arrow in a circle pointing to the right, and it sort of suggests the fact of a button, something you would then click on. So we have this vector now here in a frame. I'm just going to click and drag that down onto my button. So I'll just do that vaguely in place first of all. Now it's not brought it into that layer. So let's make sure we find in the layers panel the button that we want, and we just expand out our button frame and then drag it into there. And there you can see this sits side by side now. Now I want to bring the text above it, so the button arrow goes on the right. So select that arrow right circle. I'm just going to change the color of this from our libraries. Well, we don't actually have that lightest gray here. It's the same as the text color, obviously. So let's just copy that hex code for now. In fact, no, let's make a style with it. Select again, make sure it's all selected, everything within this vector, and then we're going to go to libraries and we're going to change it to grey background LT. Your styles and variables you can always clean up later. Let's make sure the aspect ratio is the same and just play with this being a bit bigger. Maybe not as big as that, 32 looks good to me. The stroke, just check yours is the same. Yeah, I think it's good at 2. I'm going to click on button and then we're going to change the space between from 8 to auto, and that will push our icon over to the right. Now that's not quite sitting perfectly over on the right there with our right hand padding. So I'm going to click on the button and then I'm going to go over to our auto layout menu and click on individual padding icon, and then we'll change the right icon padding down to 16, the same as the top and bottom. So that circle just fits properly within the roundness of the right of that button. Okay, this is looking a lot more button-like now. You can see when comparing it with the gold one on the left. So let's do the exact same thing here. We are just going to hold down Option while we click and drag a copy of this. Make sure they're in the right order. Go over to button. We need to change the space between to auto. We need to go to individuals padding and change the right padding to 16. And that is done. So these are looking more button-like now with the benefit of an icon. I think we can do something with these lists as well. They're not very delineated. Just bullet points would work. But maybe we could have kind of a funky looking bullet point here. So let's just see what we've got in this icon list. I can already see some ticks, some check marks. Maybe this one in a circle because we've already got an arrow in a circle. And that makes sense. You so often see this thing as what's included when you see a plan guide. So let's drag this down into the right place. So it's got to go within our features container. And then to select that and the first feature and then Shift A to make an auto layout frame. Then I'm going to go over and make it go horizontally. And the gap between is 8, which we'll leave that for now. Is it better, bigger? No, I think 8 was fine. And we'll just align that to the middle vertically. Let's just zoom to that. I've just clicked on that and then press Shift 2 to zoom to the selection. Yeah, so that looks really nice as a kind of bullet point using an icon. Makes it more interesting. Let's select this check circle. It's a bit strong though, and it's pulling a little bit of focus. So if we use our gold color, it will really help emphasize that it's part of this, but it means that it doesn't pull too much from the actual list that we're reading. Zooming out to look at the wider thing, I think that's going to look really good and really help make sense of information so it's more scannable. So we want to do this many, many times. Now, there's a few ways we can do this, but I think it's simple as any to firstly rename the layers so that we know what we're looking at, because we've got a frame 3, a frame 1, a frame 6 that I can see to begin with. And it's called this feature item, the tick with the text label next to it as well. So how many do I have here? I've got another 6, 7, 6. So I'm going to click on feature item and then Command D 6 more times. So I've got enough of these. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to expand the bottom feature item and I'm going to click on the bottom text feature and drag that up so it goes within the right place, and then click on the weight room in each one and then just backspace to delete it. So I'll just go through now and do that on each one of these. Fantastic. Now they do look a bit tight now with that icon in there. So I'm going to click on features container and just look at this space between. Maybe if we push it up to 16, it's maybe too much. Maybe just somewhere in between. Split the difference again, 12. Yeah, that really looks like a unit now and it's really clear to read. And again, compare it to the list on the right, which is not as scannable as the one that has the icons with it. So we want to do this same thing here now over onto the other side. I think the easiest is just select the whole features container and bring that over. So I'm going to click the individual feature container, duplicate it, Command D, and then I'm going to click and drag it over to the family one. And then the family one, I'm going to rename the existing one, or the one we had before, as features container old. Don't worry about the broken layout for now. We'll just drag the feature container back into the correct place. There we go. So we've got our new and our old. Now I'm going to select all the ones that are duplicated. So from weight room all the way down to batting cages. Shift click and then backspace and delete all those. So we've just got our 2 to add now. And then our asterisks to add back in, of course. So with the new features container, I've just noticed the selection color of gold. I'm going to change that to brand blue so we know which one we are looking at. Then I just need to duplicate 2 more of these feature items, Command D. And the same thing, just drag the text in, soft play area first of all, and delete batting cages. And then the Little League team on the next one up. Delete batting cages, delete the old features container frame that we don't need anymore. Then just check which ones were starred again. It's the top 3. And that makes sense. You probably don't want a 5-year-old in the weight room or a 7-year-old in a sauna. So let's put some asterisks next to these. Anybody else want to sign up for this gym? It sounds absolutely incredible. Okay, those graphics definitely made sense of it. Now, this works as a flat layout. This could work well in a certain branding scheme, but for the purposes of UI design, I want to show you how to add a little bit more depth to it. So let's think about using gradients and effects. So a gradient, first of all, we'll click on the individual and then add a fill, and we'll start off with our gold. Then what we're going to do is we're going to break the link, detach the style, then click on the fill swatch, then on the gradient icon. And we have here gold 100% to gold 0% at the moment. I'm just going to switch those around, and then I'm going to click and drag my gold from that white circle to the very top right. You see it lined up with the red lines, the guidelines, and then the other point of the gradient, I'm going to drag that to the very middle. Okay, so you can see the basic idea that we're bringing through with this card now. Now this is obviously too dark, too strong. So I'm going to go down to this swatch, click on it, and I'm going to change the lightness so it's very light. So again, we've got an off-white kind of gold. So maybe 100% obviously brings it fully white. That's too much. So we'll just start with maybe 90. Maybe 95. So we've got 42, 95, 95. And then I'm just going to copy that hex code. I'm going to paste it in at the bottom. And we have that very light gold from 100% to 0% just going across from the top right of the card there. Again, this might be a bit banded on the video rendering, but it should look lovely and smooth on your screen in Figma if you're following along. Let's do the same thing on the family card. I'm going to click to select it on the layers panel. I'm going to go over and add a fill. I'm going to go from my libraries. I'm going to use brand blue. I'm going to detach the style. I'm going to click on the swatch. I'm going to go to the gradient icon, and I am going to drag my brand blue to the top right. And then the other point of the gradient, which let's just make this something random for now so we can see it's very different, pink. So we know we need to change it. Make sure that's in the middle. I'm going to back to my brand blue, and I'm just going to use the same idea, 95 lightness, I think. Maybe with a saturation as well, that does need to come down. We'll do 90 might be enough. Okay, we'll copy that hex reference, we'll paste it in. But we need to make sure it goes down to 0% opacity in the middle. Now, because we used, we actually replaced our fill there with the linear gradient, which was a mistake. It should be over the top of our very light grey card. So I'm just going to go to my individual and copy the fill from the frame there, then back to family, and then Command V, paste it, and then just drag it underneath. That's better. So we can turn that off, on, and you can just see how it looks, and it just adds something to these. So they're very much two separate plans here. We can see the difference very, very clearly and scan from gold to blue. We know which one is which. Now we're introducing a bit of depth with the gradient. We could also do that with some effects and add a bit of light and shadow to just help these pop off from that background. So I'm going to click on the individual frame again. I'm going to go to the effects row. I'm going to click plus to add an effect. Let's start with a drop shadow. So let's change the opacity up to 100% so we can see it. You can see that thick black shadow now under the individual card. And we can play with this blur. Now we can actually see it. Turn it up to 8, 16, whatever. Go all the way up and down and see how wide we want this to be. I think somewhere around 16 seems normal, but it's still a bit high up at the top for me. I want the light to hit from the top. So I'm just going to push it down a little bit. And just play with this to the eye and get a feel for what you think it should be. You can see it there way, way down. But I think something like this, 6, just so it's a little bit down below. So we've got 0, 6, 16, black, and the opacity, well, I want this way down. I don't want this over the top. Over the top, intense drop shadows always look really amateurish. So we want to make this very subtle in the UI, 10%, even in these single digits, maybe 5%. And that's a very subtle shadow. You might not be able to see it again on the video. You probably can on your Figma screen. But if we select individual and then just turn it off, on, you can sort of see that change here on the screen when we turn it off and on. Beautiful. Okay, let's zoom back out so we can see the whole card. And click on individual again and add a bit of the light to the top. So this time I'm going to go with an inner shadow and I'm going to change the color here to white. Just make sure you're getting 100% white there. All the Fs. So we're on an X of 0 like we had before with the shadow, so they look like they belong together. The Y, we can probably make the same 6. And the blur, I think exactly the same as the drop shadow, but the only difference it being white and it being 100%. And if you look at the top, particularly the top right, let's zoom in so it's easy for you. And select it again, the individual frame, and turn it off and on. You can just see in that right corner especially the effect of that Y. And again, if you play with it on your screen, it will look right. But this just makes this card look a little bit 3D and have a little bit of a sense of, depth and softness to it now. So this whole effect style we can create now, so we can reuse it. And we'll call it card, shadow. If I can spell. Maybe just call it LT because it's for our light mode. We're going to do dark mode in a minute. Exciting stuff. Click on family. Go over to the effects. Click on the icon there for the styles. And then just click one click to add it. And I think we are pretty much there now. We have gone from a very flat looking wireframe and really made sense of the information, as well as adding some visual interest to the page, even without adding any photography or illustration, 3D, anything like that going on. We didn't need any of that to make sense of this UI and also bring a little bit of interest and personality while still keeping it very professional and legible. Let's try dark mode. Select the design frame. Hold down Option while you're clicking and dragging. And we'll rename this design Dark DK. So let's change the fill color. Instead of this, we will want black in the background. So that's 0 lightness. That's fully black. But like with light mode, that might be too contrasted. So let's just bring it to an off black here. So maybe a 5% lightness. Just playing around with these values a little bit. Again, won't be able to see it so much on video, but probably on your screen. Maybe if we draw a black rectangle next to this, you'll be able to see the difference between this very slightly blue off black and fully black on the left and the right there. Can you see the difference? So let's change our text. We can actually do the whole thing. We know that our grey text here is a style. So we could just break the link here and change the lightness value. So 100 would be fully white. So we need to bring that down a little bit. Maybe just bring it to 99. So it's still very much, kind of a white, but it's just off. In fact, that's what we had before. So we're just making sure that that is the off-white, which it is the FCFCFD for all of our off-whites in this frame. I also brought the link to the light grey, which was on the back of the cards there, and that was that same colour there. So let's select the cards and bring in a dark mode colour for those, individual and family. So we're going to replace this fill here. Let's do it one at a time, actually. We'll click on individual because I want to preserve the gradient on top for now. And I'll just change that lightness from 90 to say 20. Still looks a bit too light, that. So we'll maybe go 10, just so it's a bit light down the background. And let's turn off that fill for now, because that's ruining our view. We're going to break the link on our effect as well and just hide the light at the top, because that was skewing us. Yeah, so we can see here we've got this slightly lighter dark grey on top of the darkest grey that we've got. And again, the same principle we talked about with light mode. We want our lightest things on the top. So the card should be lighter than the whole page background, but obviously it still needs to be very dark because we want lots of contrast from our off-white text. So let's do the same thing with family. Make sure the color of that, the fill underneath, is the same, and we'll just break the link to the effect and hide the inner shadow as well, so we don't have that white glow on the top. Now our drop shadow we can't really see. We're going to change the color here up to 100%. So we've got a fully black on our almost black background. Let's do the same for the individual. We'll go over to the drop shadow and we'll change the color to 100%. So now we can add back in our inner shadow. We'll click on the effect settings and we'll just kind of flip this around. So we had 5% and 100% for the drop shadow and the inner shadow. We'll do that the other way around here. So change the opacity there to 5% of the white. Do the same on family. And just gives it a little bit of rounding there on the top. So we've gone into dark mode now. The only thing I would say is maybe the contrast is a bit of an issue. I'm looking at that text that says family in blue on that almost black background, and I'm not really happy with that. So I think for dark mode, we could actually change this colored up type, and coloring up type is not usually a good idea. It was okay in the first instance. We had enough contrast and it worked. So I'm just going to make these all the same color. I'm going to say brown blue, but let's just split that and let's just change this to our white or off-white that we're using for all the other text here, which is FC, FC, FD. Perhaps it should be a style. Dark mode. Text. So selecting all those, adding a fill, dark mode text. Yeah, and that's just more legible now, but we still get the delineation between the two, particularly from the buttons as the way they span across. And that links in with the colours that are there. And it doesn't really matter that the bullet point ticks or the blue stroke don't contrast that much because they don't need to be red. Okay, now let's go into the gradient. So I'm going to add back in the gradient fill on there. You can see it's way too much. So we can keep that same gradient, but just turn the opacity down. And we kind of fool with it, 10%, 20%. Maybe it's a bit too much still. Split the difference again, I think. 15%. Yeah, that just gives that slight depth to it there. We'll add back in the blue one. Again, it's too light, 15%. Hey presto. Off. And back on, and again it will look banded on video, but not so much on my Figma screen here. It looks really smooth. I'm pretty happy with that. So let's have a look and compare these. We had our original wireframe. Now, okay, maybe this is a pretty limited wireframe. You'd maybe do a little bit more with the spacing for a true wireframe, but just the point of when you actually introduce all these different elements and follow our process, which I'll recap in a moment, you can really see how we can add to it without using imagery and illustration, but actually just going through the process of what we need to change one by one and then going back and forth and tweaking things a little bit. We can get a really clear looking pricing page that is going to be really easy for a user to scan and to understand and to make a decision. Let's recap. First, tackle typography, choosing fonts, typesetting and hierarchy. Then work on layout and spacing, introduce color, establish a design system, add graphical polish, and try out light and dark modes. This process and the principles we talked about along the way should give you a good start on your journey as a UI designer. Keep practicing, pick up some more tips from our other videos, and until next time, happy designing.